what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, this weekend, we've got kind of a double whammy, if you will. There's two shows this weekend that I'm going to be watching. The Italy Pro, which we talked about yesterday, and also the Florida Pro. This is going to be where Logan Franklin is attempting to earn his qualification fairly last minute for the 2025 Mr. Olympia. Now, obviously, earlier in the year, we saw Logan Franklin at the Arnold Classic where he was runner-up. Probably the best version of Logan that we've ever seen. Great conditioning, great posing routine. Just overall, I think the best Logan. He really nailed his peak for that show. And looking at this lineup here, I don't see really any reason to think that Logan's not going to win this show. I know there was some talk about potentially Matthias Menengate doing this show, but it looks like he's not doing it. I feel like he's a guy, maybe one of the only guys that would have really given Logan a run for his money here. I like his physique a lot. We saw him compete a couple times this season. But looking at this lineup, I think Logan's going to win this show, and there's not going to be much concern about him qualifying. I don't see, I think at this point, it would really take a top Olympian to knock Logan off from really any lineup. I think based on what we saw at the Arnold, and looking at these recent physique updates that his coach Patrick Torr posted a day ago, it looks like he's bringing a very similar package to what we saw him bring at the Arnold. Conditioning-wise, I mean, he looks peeled to the bone going into this Florida show. And if he looks anything like he looked at the Arnold or similar to that look, I don't think anybody's going to beat him. I mean, as of the Arnold, Ohio, the winner, Mike Sommerfeld, I think is considered by many to be the best classic physique guy in the world on paper. And Mike's the only guy that placed ahead of Logan at that Arnold. And I think there was even conversation of people thinking Logan should have won. So I think that Logan has probably got this in the bag, and I think, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but I do think we're going to see him at the Olympia. I would just say it's interesting to watch because I would say at this point, Logan is probably the biggest name not qualified for the Olympia, and we're getting very last minute here as far as the cutoff to qualify. I think that if we see Logan come in how he looked at the Arnold or better, and I think he's going to be better at the Olympia, I think he's going to be first call out and probably the best Olympia placing in Classic that he's ever gotten. But first, he's got to win this Florida Pro. So again, don't want to put the cart before the horse, but that's another thing that I'm going to be watching this weekend. Now, next up in the news, I saw the video from Wesley Vissers talking about, kind of teasing that he would switch to open bodybuilding. But if you watch the full video, essentially the video was him talking about other people switching and then him, stating his intention to stay in classic physique. So he's not actually switching to open bodybuilding, but he did say one interesting thing towards the end of that video, that he does have the goal before his career is finished to compete in at least one open show. Not necessarily switch to open, but kind of do what Chris Bumstead did and maybe close out his career on one open show just to see how it goes. Now, I was actually glad to see that this was Wesley's take here because as exciting as these crossovers are, it's definitely exciting to see somebody like Chris Bumstead come over and compete in open bodybuilding. It's definitely exciting for guys like Urs to make this transition like permanently. He's going to be an open guy now. These are exciting things to watch. But I do think at a certain point, when you've got two of the biggest remaining faces of the classic physique division in the world, Ramon and Urs, both talking about eventually moving to open bodybuilding, I feel like you do need some guys that are representatives of that classic physique division, big title winners, top Olympia placers, guys like Wesley that won 2 Arnold Classic titles that are saying, I bleed classic physique. I'm staying in this division till the end. Maybe I'll do an open show, as a fun thing to do. But classic is where my heart is. I feel like to an extent, there needs to be some guys that really hold up that banner. And, there's guys like Urs and Ramon too, where it doesn't make sense for them to stay in classic physique if they're not improving and they feel like the reason they're not is that they're being held back by that weight limit and they feel like maybe they can improve in a division without that limit. It's a necessity for them. If they want to keep getting better, they've got to move. Because think about what it would have meant if Wesley's video was him announcing he was done with classic and moving to open. Chris Bumstead retired after last year's Olympia. And it's already going to be interesting to see the impact that Chris being gone is going to have on the classic physique division. But imagine that not only Chris, but then Wesley and Urs and then Ramon maybe a year or two later. But Wesley, Chris, we're all now out of the Classic Physique division and out of the Classic Physique Olympia. I feel like that would be a significant hit to the popularity of the division. Chris retiring, and then 3 of the most popular guys essentially saying, well, Open is our end game. That's our destination. That's where we really want to be. I feel like for the integrity of the division, you do need some guys that are just going to stay in Classic till the end and never leave. And that's not to say that I disagree with the decision with a guy like Urs. I think it's best for him if he was really struggling to make weight and those weight limits were holding him back from bringing his best to the stage. Then, of course, I think he should move up. But at the same time, you need people that are going to just stay in Classic and not necessarily, step up from Classic to Open like it's a stepping stone. And again, I'm not saying that's what Urs is doing or Ramon or anybody else, but I feel like for the Classic Physique division to remain as popular as it was with Chris Bumstead, with Chris Bumstead's rivalries, his rivalry with Ramon, his rivalry with Urs, his rivalry with Terrence and Breon. These are the things that made that division so popular. And now we're talking about not only the absence of Chris, but maybe the absence of all his greatest rivals. And not to mention Breon. I mean, Breon has opted to come back to the Classic Physique Olympia this year, but he's older. Who knows how many years Breon is going to stick around. Maybe this is going to be his last one. Breon might not look it, but he's 45 years old. He is 15 years older than most of these guys that we're talking about. Chris, Urs, Ramon. So anyway, my point is I'm glad that we have guys like Wesley that are staying till the end, because I do feel like it's definitely going to impact the division, seeing a lot of these top guys leave right now or in the near future. And I think the absence of Chris Bumstead now compounds anybody else leaving, the impact that would be felt. And I feel like you're probably going to see the Classic Physique division as a whole get really completely reshaped in the next couple of years, with people starting to leave or go to Open, and maybe that, that criteria, that standard being set going forward with whoever wins this year. I feel like Classic is probably going to look pretty different in 2 or 3 years. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What is your thought on Classic Physique guys crossing over to Open and the future of the Classic Physique division? Now, next up in the news, Nick Walker posting a side-by-side comparison update looking extremely dangerous going into the 2025 Olympia. 6 weeks out, the photo on the left in the more red trunks was 5 weeks out from Pittsburgh. He's weighing 278. The picture on the right, in a little bit more, I guess maybe burgundy trunks, he's weighing 286, 6 weeks out from the Olympia. And then the other one, again, 5 weeks out from Pittsburgh. So further out from the Olympia. So he's 8 pounds heavier, and in my opinion, much more detailed in that back double bicep shot than he was at 5 weeks out from Pittsburgh at a lighter body weight. So he's heavier and more detailed. And I think this is one of the things that makes Nick Walker's back double bicep so dangerous, and one of the reasons why I might even say that I prefer it to Derek Lunsford. And Derek, of course, is like a god from the back. He's almost unbeatable. But I think Nick's arms and shoulders are what make that pose so dangerous. Because, this has been a big knock on Derek, the lack of peaked biceps, the lack of, really detail in the arms. Nick has that crazy back in the back double. He's got the size, he's got the detail. But I think the size of his arms, the peaks on his biceps, the shape of his shoulders, the detail in his arms in this pose really complete it for him compared to a guy like Derek. You're not seeing really Derek's bicep peaks from the back. You're not seeing really striated triceps on Derek in that back double bicep pose. So I feel like Nick's arms in that back double make it such a more dangerous pose for him. And I think the fact that he looks more detailed and bigger, and it's the same lighting, it's the same pose, it's the same lighting, it's the same place. I think Nick is a genuine threat at the Olympia this year. I do think he needs to keep his midsection in check. I think he needs to make sure he's controlling it well, because I think that's the biggest thing that separates him from the 3 guys that are probably standing in his way: Samson, Hadi, Derek. These guys don't have any issue with their midsection. These guys are pulling deep vacuum poses. Hadi Chupin's got probably some of the most deep, separated, conditioned abs in the game. His abs, his serratus, his obliques. These guys are very dangerous in the midsection, and that's like the one thing I would say that could hold Nick back. And of course, people have been critical of his quad development. That's another one. But when I look at the 3 guys that everybody's talking about in the mix for winning the Olympia this year, Hadi, Derek, Sampson. I think the biggest difference from their physiques to Nick's is the midsection. Because I think maybe other than a front lat spread and maybe an abs and thighs, other than those two poses, I feel like Nick is very competitive and hanging with everybody on pretty much every other pose. You know, you say the back poses are typically a slam dunk for a guy like Derek. I don't think Derek's back double bicep is a slam dunk against a Nick that's looking like this. I really don't. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Where do you have Nick Walker placing at the 2025 Mr. Olympia? Can he crack the top 3? Can he win? Because here's the other thing. I think it was maybe Muscle Discord put up a post where he said, well, if Nick Walker, if he were to win the Olympia this year, it would set the precedent that you could have a big midsection and win the Olympia going forward, which is one of the reasons why I think Nick needs to work on that. I think that is something that he needs to make sure he has control over at the Olympia, without a doubt. Do I think Nick winning would set a standard that they're saying, okay, the midsection being distended is okay again? I actually don't. Because we haven't had anybody win the Olympia that seemingly has set a new standard in the last, 6, 7 years? I mean, think about your last 4 Olympia champs. Ramy, Hadi, Derek, Sampson. I think all 4 of those physiques look nothing alike. We have a new champ basically every year. The winner each year doesn't really seem to set a new standard. I don't really think that's been the case, you know, like we saw with a Ronnie Coleman or a Dorian Yates or even a Phil Heath that really did kind of set a new standard. We're not really seeing guys win the Olympia lately that are setting any kind of standard, I think. You know, going from a guy, you know, we're talking about the past 4 Olympia champs. Hadi and Sampson, I feel like, could not have more different physiques. Ramy and Derek Lunsford, I feel like, could not have more different physiques. I feel like nobody is setting any type of standard that's winning the Olympia. And I feel like that's why the Olympia has become so hard to predict who's going to win the show, is because it's hard to tell what direction they're going in. Going from Derek winning to Sampson, going from Ramy winning to Hadi, going from Hadi to Derek. These physiques are very different. So I say that to say I don't think necessarily that it's likely that Nick is going to win. Like I said, I just don't think it's impossible. I think he could win. I'm not saying I think he will, but I think he could. And I think that if he did win, it wouldn't necessarily mean that Nick is setting this new standard. It just means that he was better than those guys on that day. So I personally wouldn't be shocked if we saw Nick win the Olympia. Like I said, I don't think it's likely. But it seems like we just have so many different physiques winning the title. And, you know, even going back before that, you went from Brandon Curry to Big Ramy. I mean, look at how different those two physiques are. I don't think we've really seen anybody set a truly new standard at the Olympia since Phil Heath. I feel like it maybe seemed like when Sean Roden won the Olympia, it seemed like they were moving in a more aesthetically pleasing physique to be the Mr. Olympia champ. But then they went from Sean to Brandon to Ramy 2 times, and Ramy really isn't in that aesthetically pleasing category. And then they went to Hadi Chupin, and it seemed like, okay, they're focusing on conditioning here. Hadi Chupin, not the most aesthetically pleasing guy, not necessarily a mass monster. Then they go from Hadi to Derek. Derek, very aesthetically pleasing, but very short. And then transitioning from Derek to Sampson, a much taller, aesthetically pleasing guy. I think, in my opinion, Derek and Sampson have 2 very different physiques. Even though they both have a great taper and a small waist, I think they're 2 very different champions. So I would say at this point in 2025, it's very hard to say what direction they're going to go in. But give me your predictions in the comments down below. Who do you have winning the 2025 Mr. Olympia? And speaking of Big Ramy, here's the latest that I've seen of Big Ramy. This is a recent picture, 6 weeks out from the Olympia recent. This was the most recent thing that I've seen where you can actually see Ramy's physique. A fan posted this. He reposted it on his story. I mean, he looks in shape. He looks big. He looks vascular. Again, you can't really see much. He's got a shirt on. He's completely covered except for his arms and forearms. He looks like he could possibly be prepping. I think Ramy is a huge wild card here. It seemed like maybe it was at the 12-week out mark or somewhere around there from the Olympia. Ramy was talking a lot about coming back and doing the Olympia this year. And ever since then, there was like a couple weeks where he was very vocal about it, reposting a bunch of stories that he's going to do it. It seems like ever since then we've heard nothing. No physique updates, no training videos, no interviews, no other posts about the Olympia. I don't know what to think about Ramy here. I had heard from a couple of his friends, or I guess people around him, that he was doing it, but I haven't heard anything since. So I guess my question to you guys is, do you think Ramy will do the 2025 Mr. Olympia? And if he does, do you think he'll be a factor at this show at all? Now, the final story that I've got for you guys today, because this video is getting a little long since I ranted a bit about the Nick Walker thing, but Goodvito's latest physique update at 6 weeks out from the Olympia. And at this point, honestly, we're already getting close to, I guess we're at 5.5 weeks. We're getting close to the 5-week out mark now. Goodvito showing a front lat spread. I like that he posted this as his update because I don't feel like this is one of his stronger poses. You see him post a lot of the most muscular that we talked about the other day, or I'm sorry, the front double bicep that we talked about the other day. He posts a lot of most musculars. This is one of the shots that I feel like is not his strongest, the front lat spread. Of course, his legs look great, his quads look great in this pose, but he doesn't really show a whole lot of lat from the front in this pose, kind of similar to Nick Walker. It's just not the best pose for him. I don't know if it's the way he's hitting it or what, but I like to see guys post poses like this that they know are not their strong suit. And, you know, speaking of Big Ramy, I think that Big Ramy is a dark horse going into the show, but I think Goodvito, for me, might be the biggest dark horse / wild card, whatever you want to call it. I feel like he has potential to be more in the mix than we would expect. I think he'll be in the top 10, but where in the top 10, I think, is the question. Is he, you know, in a 9th or 10th place spot, or is he potentially, you know, fighting for a top 6 spot, or even, you know, hell, in the top 6? I think the two things holding him back right now are his posing and his back shots, which might go hand in hand. His shots from the back are not the best, but I think he's very shaky still in some poses from what we saw of him in Detroit, and more recently even still at the Arnold Classic South America. But we know that he's got the size. He's got a pretty good structure. He's got a pretty good V-taper. He's got a freak factor to him. He's got a crazy body part being his lower body. And he's got a track record of bringing really good condition. At least that Detroit condition version of him was crazy, where he almost beat Martin Fitzwater. So he's proven himself. He's won a show. And he's got weapons in his arsenal. Size, condition, shape, freak factor body parts, a little bit of wow factor. I think he could surprise us with how well he does. And I also think it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see him compete at the Pittsburgh Pro against guys like Nick and Derek to see how he stacks up, because that Arnold Classic Brazil he did wasn't the best lineup. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know where you guys think Goodvito is going to place at the 2025 Mr. Olympia. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.